In this video you're going to learn how to create the paper grunge texture effect in Premiere Pro with the help of Photoshop. My name is Badr Hassani. I'm a director and editor and my goal is to teach you everything I know. So hit subscribe and leave a like if you get something from this video. Quick note before we get started, you can download the textures I'm using in this video. I'll leave that link below if you want to follow along or take your content to the next level. Alright, let's dive in. I have two clips here from the music video Laugh Now Cry Later by Drake featuring Lil Durk. The frame I want to turn into a paper texture is right here, and I'm going to select it by pressing M to leave a marker. This makes it easier to come back to the spot later. I'm marking every 10 frames because I want to create an animation effect. Once I've selected the frames I need, I'm going to export them as PNGs. Now let's jump into Photoshop. In Photoshop, I'm going to start by duplicating my clip. To do that, I'll hold Alt and drag the layer down. Now I'll select the top layer and remove the background by pressing the Remove Background button in the Quick Actions panel. Next, I'm going to refine the mask. Right-click on the black and white icon next to the layer and hit Select and Mask. This will open a window that lets us adjust the edge shift and radius and adjust the smooth. Once that's done, hit OK. Now it's time to bring in the paper textures. Like I mentioned earlier, you can download them from the link below. I'm placing the texture below my subject layer. To clean it up, select the Magic Eraser tool and erase all white areas. Then I'll go through and delete the parts I don't need. Once I've removed what I don't want, I'll duplicate the texture layer. This gives us two separate paper textures to work with. Now I'm going to separate the texture for two pieces and clean it more a little bit. Feel free with your texture. Now my paper texture is pretty much ready. For the final touch, we're going to add some puppet warp to give it that natural paper burned effect. Go up to Edit and select Puppet Warp. I'm adding a lot of points. You can add as many points as you need to make the effect look right. And then I'll slowly adjust the texture to fit around the subject. And we can see here to curve this, I'm going to come up here and come around his head. I didn't worry too much about making it all the way around Drake edge. And there you go. Texture is in place. I'm going to rotate the second one. We have another paper here that we can use on the other side. You can see sometimes you can stretch the texture a little too much and it can be obvious. So we want to kind of avoid that, but I'm going to keep going through here. Now you have a cool paper grunge texture effect that brings your clips to life. Now I'm going to bring in another paper texture. So just adds more variation of different types of burnt papers around Drake edge. Now selecting my second paper, I'm going to not worry about cleaning this one up too much because it seems to be fine. I'm just adding as many points as I need to really fit it to my edges. I'm just going to erase all the rest that I don't need. And there we go. One, and let's say it's enough for Drake's screen at this moment, so let's jump to Lil Durk's screen. And this one's a little bit more of a messy texture. So I'm just going to do the same here. And I'm going to just clean it up here. As much as I can, as you can see, I copied and pasted it around, kind of adding it in certain areas, and this is what I got. And it kind of looks kind of generic at the moment, so we want to add a little bit more texture, so I'm going to drag in another texture. Next, we're done with the first screen featuring Drake and Lil Durk. So I select my subject and my paper rips, and I'm actually going to create a smart object. So by double clicking on this little icon here, this will open up another Photoshop file with our subject and our paper groups. This allows us to combine this all into one layer, but we can still edit it for later. So now we're going to add some texture around the edges just to give it a little bit more of a one feel. Now I'm just going to fill the inside of this. I'm not worrying too much about being perfect with it, because we want it to be more grungy than perfect. It gives us this texture which isn't great. And then we'll come back into our original Photoshop file. Now here I'm going to bring in another texture, and it's going to be a paper texture overlay. I'm going to scale this to fit our subject. I'm going to hold Alt and click on our paper texture over our subject. So here, the choice depends on your footage and on your vision. For my footage, I'm going to set the first texture to overlay and drag it onto Lil Durk's layer. That should be enough for this tutorial. Next, I'll bring in more textures and apply them in soft light and pin light. Let's also slightly decrease the opacity for all three texture layers. Well, I'm showing you this inspiration and this process, but you can improve your imagination. Feel free to edit with your vision. And here's the result. 4 looks good to me. So now we're going to add some texture around the edges just to give it a little bit more of a one feel. We're going to find a brush. I'm going to use just the normal brush. And as you can see here, this brush allows us to add a little bit more imperfections. I'm not worrying too much about being perfect. Now repeat this process for all the frames. Once everything is done, bring the PNGs into Premiere Pro and line them up in your sequence. Now, try to apply the same process to the rest of your screenshots. Once you've done that, go up to File and select Export, saving them as PNG files. Now, as you can already see, we have this really cool grunge burn paper effect that looks already pretty dope. So once I've done that for this last frame, this frame is going to be a little bit different but similar at the same time. I'm going to bring that frame into Photoshop again because this frame is going to be more so a transition. In Photoshop, I'm going to actually create 3 different versions of this one frame. So one version we want to go through, and I want to cut this one like this. And then I'm going to cut my other one like this, so it kind of looks like we're unfolding the paper over. It's like we've taken multiple frames and add different types of textures just to have the same look like it comes into frame, like folding into frame. We just want to keep going all the way around, so I'm going to repeat the same process I did before and add my textures to the screen. Let me show you what I did here. I'm going to copy my previous paper effects. You can change the textures to make them look different. In Premiere Pro, now that you've added your textures and paper rips, I want to set up my footage to make space for the transition. I'm going to place different frames with various types of rips like this so that when we press play, the effect folds out smoothly. I also added a paper effect underneath to create separation between the first and second clip clips. I'll leave a little bit of overhang on the last frame to finish it off. This is what it looks like. You could stop here, but I like to take it a step further by adding more texture on top. I also added this effect to give it some extra flow. This is the final result. Now you know how to create this effect in Premiere Pro and Photoshop. I hope you learned something from this tutorial, and I'll catch you in the next one.